Hello, my name is Brad Duffy and welcome to the University of Speed video. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself in case you don't know who I am. I'm a speed sailor and I also go around the country and do clinics in order to teach people how to sail faster. We work on everything from how to rig your stuff for more speed, how to set up your board, what kind of fins to use, stance, attitude, the whole deal. And in this video, we're going to try to bring some of that across so that wherever you're sailing, you can watch this, go out, try some of the drills, try some of the tips, and hopefully improve your speed. Most people who've been to my clinics in person have improved their overall speed anywhere from 3 to 5 miles an hour in a period of like 1 day. So this stuff really works. Give it a try and see what happens. The things to watch for in this video are the real subtle differences. The subtle things make the big difference. Little differences in how you tune your rig, how you're holding your body while you're sailing, where your mast is, how tall your rig is, what your board is doing. All those things combined, just a small amount of each one can make the difference of 4 or 5 miles an hour. So you're not going to see huge examples of good and bad, but you will see subtle ones, and I'll try to point those out to you. All right, let's begin with the rig. The rig is your engine. It's what provides your power. It also provides probably the largest amount of drag of anything, especially when you're on your little high wind slalom board with your little fin and everything's cruising. The rig can slow you down more than anything, and that's why it's important to have it rigged right. And my experience from going all over the country is that there's been a lot of clinics happening over the last few years, and most of the clinics are pretty good and they show you how to rig up a sail properly. So I'm not going to go deep into that. You don't need it. Most people have seen it. The couple of things I will tell you though is that for going really fast, you generally are going to rig a ½ meter to even maybe a meter bigger than your average size sail for a given day. And when you do that, you need to throw a little bit of extra downhaul on the sail, flatten it out a little bit more, get that leash nice and loose, and also the battens are really important. Crank the camber battens down really hard, and also your regular just straight battens. Get everything nice and tight, because when you're powered up, you don't want that thing to be bucking around on you. You need to be in control and have it be smooth. Let's get right into some basic concepts of how to sail fast. There's a bunch of different things to work on, so let's just begin with the feet and the legs. A lot of people I see trying to sail fast, they get out in their normal water, which is fairly choppy, especially when it's windy. They get well powered up on their slalom board, and they straighten out their legs when they get on a reach or a broad reach. And they think by straightening out their legs, they can really hammer the board, drive it forward. It's true in part, but what starts to happen is that your legs, being stiff, start to force the board into the chop. It hits harder, it bounces higher, and it actually becomes harder to control, and you slow down. So what I suggest you do is when you're sailing powered and really fast and chop is like let the board flow. Let the board flow up and down over the pieces of chop, little ones, small ones. Keep the ankles loose, keep your knees loose. You know, continue to push and drive with your thighs forward with the board, but don't get too stiff. Try to be relaxed, let it flow. Let's talk a little bit about harness lines. Right now they're very much in the news. Everybody's talking about let's go with the really short harness lines, or some of the old school guys are saying no, they're really good long. Harness lines are definitely a personal preference. A couple things I will say is that for course slalom racing, going upwind, downwind on a slalom board, I'd say it's proven that shorter lines are faster for going upwind, and there probably isn't anybody out there who isn't using a fairly short line for going upwind, downwind. As far as speed sailing goes, there's a few problems with short lines. Some people can make them work, but for the average person, I would say a little bit longer line is going to afford you some more control. You don't want the lines to get too long so that the rig gets well away from you and you start to lose control of it, and it also will push the nose of the board down. And you don't want them so short that you feel like you're attached to the rig and you're pulling the rig well over to windward. Both of those things are slow. Try to find a happy medium. Another comment about harness lines is that I feel that the main reason harness lines have gotten so short in the last couple of years is due to the new style boards. 3 or 4 years ago, the average deck box position, in other words, the distance from the tail of the board to the back of the deck box, was around 60 inches from the tail. Nowadays, 50 to 52 inches is pretty common, and that's a 10-inch difference. So that means that the rig is 10 inches closer to your body. I think this is the main reason that harness lines have gotten so short. There's a lot of other things going on, like the fins are better, the sails are easier to control. Those all contribute to it, but probably the biggest single reason is that the deck boxes have come quite a bit further back on the board. Now that we're on the subject of harness lines, this brings us to our first drill. This is an exercise that if you go out and work on this a little bit, you'll discover what the right length harness line is for you and your setup. What I want you to do is go out on a nice windy day where you're fairly powered up, get on a reach going straight across the wind, get sheeted in going at top speed. As soon as you're going as fast as you can possibly go, unhook from your harness lines and maintain that same speed. The key here is to watch what happens to your hips and your legs. When you unhook, you need to move your hips quite a ways away from the boom and from the rig in order to maintain that same speed. Then you might want to try a little bit longer harness line. If you unhook at top speed and you find that your hips actually move closer to the boom or to the rig in order to maintain the same speed, then you probably want to try a little bit shorter harness line. If you unhook and basically the rope is just swinging against your hook and your hips have stayed in the same position, your harness lines are just about perfect. Give that a try a few different times on both tacks and you'll really learn something about your own harness line length. Okay, exercise 2. That is the anti-wheelie drill, for lack of a better term. What you should do on this drill is same kind of setup. Cruise along on a reach to a broad reach, get going as fast as you possibly can, and what I want you to do is rake your rig as far back as you can rake it and hammer on your back leg. Really stand on your back leg and try to get the board to actually wheelie up out of the water. As soon as it starts to wheelie up, what I want you to do is sheet in harder and try to get up tall and lean forward onto your front foot to push it back down. The worst thing you can do when you start to wheelie is to sheet out and stomp harder on your back foot. That always leads to a bigger wheelie. So get out there, get going really fast, get a little wheelie going, sheet in, lean forward onto your front foot and stop the wheelie. And practice this a few times so it comes natural to you the next time you're going really fast and you get a wheelie going. This segment is this shows what it looks like to be totally dialed for the chop. The lines, the track, the boom height, everything's about right, and you can tell by how the board is riding, the rig's very upright, it's going fast, and the board is smooth over the chop, catching a little air here and there, but basically riding horizontally and real smooth. This is the dialed for chop shot. The things to look for in this example are the fact that the harness lines are very short, what I would call too short. You can see that the arms are bent, they're not extended out at all. The mast is raked way over to weather, and you see the board is bouncing around pretty hard and doesn't look too fast or too good. It's comfortable, it takes all the pressure off your arms, and you can sail all day with really short lines like that, but if you want to go really fast, you're going to have to extend them out a little bit further than that. And this is a dialed in example. This is in chop, this is dialed in, the lines are about the right length, and you can see that the mast is more upright, the arms are extended, and things are going quite a bit faster. In this example, it's a perfect example. No, this is a perfect example of somebody with their booms too high. Unfortunately, it's me, but I was the only person around to show you what's up. So I had to put the booms up way too high and come sending it in. Now you can see the board is just wheeling out all over the place. It's bouncing up and down. You see the fin. This is not good. It's slapping hard. It's basically very slow. It looks really fast because there's lots of action happening, but it's slow. Trust me on that one. So this is too high of a boom. Good example. Watch it and learn. This is a shot of a perfect send. This is so much fun. You cannot even believe it. Board's trimmed out, unreal, and you're just on the tail. Your adrenaline is just pumping. This is roughly about 50 miles an hour, what you're seeing right here. It's sort of a feeling where you're about to be ripped over the front of your board, but you hold it down. Your arms are extended out, you've got good pressure on your legs, and it still feels like you're about to be ripped over the front of your board, but all that power that starts to rip you over the front, you just handle it. And you pull back, and you drive that right through the board into forward motion, and the feeling is out of hand. Okay, this is the big hammering puff. You're going about 1,000,000, you get it under control, you sheet in hard, your arms are extended out, your knees are slightly bent, you're driving it forward with your front leg, your ankles are just flowing, they're just like loose, they're letting the board do what it wants to do, it's railed up high, you got about 8 inches of the tail in the water, and at any second you could be dust in the wind, but you're not. you hold it together and you just send it. This is a great look at what your ankles and legs should look like. It should look loose, yet firm. They're kind of holding it together, but they're not stopping it from doing what it wants to do unless it's something that's going to mess you up. Just let it flow. Let it happen. In this shot, there's a nice close-up of my toes. And you see on my front foot, my toes are just curled straight up. And there's a reason for that, and that is that I'm in a puff that's probably somewhere around 35 knots. And the last thing in the world I want to have happen is my front foot come ripping out of the foot strap. So don't be deceived when you see guys with their toes curled. Curling your toes is just a way to keep your foot in the strap. You're not lifting up on the front of the board. You're actually pushing down with more of the outside of your front foot. But the toes curled deal is fine if it keeps you in the foot strap. This is a pretty good run right here, but you can see a pretty costly error. About halfway down the run, hit a little hole, and I'm so committed to the rig that I oversheet, and it totally slows me down. You got to watch out to not get too hung up on the rig. You got to let the rig up tall and let it breathe, let it do its thing. If you get too hammered on it, too sheeted in, you can find yourself oversheeting and slowing way down. Here's a good example of an extremely stable rig through a whole speed run. This is what you want to have happen while you're sailing at home, drag racing your buddy. If you can hold your rig this stable and sheet it in and trimmed out for the entire drag race, it'll be over pretty fast. In this run, the booms are up a little bit high, and if you check it out, you watch the board starts to lift up in the front. The nose starts popping up in the big puff, and I have to hammer down on my front leg to push it back down. Causes me to go off the wind a little bit. That's a little bit of a control problem. I wish my booms would have been about half an inch lower. It would have felt nice. When your booms are too low, it can cause a lot of problems. Sometimes when you're way overpowered and you have trouble holding the rig down, or holding the board down on the water, lowering the boom a bit can help. But when you have a low boom, a lot of times what it will do is it cause the nose of the board to slap the water really hard. You don't feel like you can get up on the fin. You're riding with too much water line. Next time you're going really fast, look back at your back foot and see where the water is coming off the board. Is it coming off right at your back foot, halfway between the back foot and the front foot? This is a good thing to know. If your booms are too low, a lot of times the water will be coming off the board right at the front foot. And you want to be able to get that thing back to where the board gets up out of the water and the water's releasing off somewhere near your back foot or just in front of it. So too low of a boom can cause tons of problems. Here the boom's a little bit high. I get a big puff again, board pops up, and you see the front foot come down on the board flatten out and turn downwind. Everything's safe, under control. The other key when this wheelie starts to happen is that you sheet the sail in a little bit. Most people want to sheet out when their board wheelies up a bit because it's a loss of control, and the first thing you want to do is slow down. But the best thing you can do when that happens is to sheet in a little bit. It helps you transfer the weight to the front leg and take care of it. All right, let's talk about your mast track a little bit. Most boards that are out there today, if you bought a board in the last year and a half, something like that, most of the tracks will go back to around 54, 55, some of them even as far back as 51 or 2 from the tail. That means the farthest back you can install your twist-on foot or your mast base is about 51 or 52 inches from the tail. That is not that far back. Most people, when they go sailing on a board, they don't want to be too far forward and they don't want to be too far back, so they end up just throwing the mast base in the middle of the track. That way none of their buddies at the beach can go, wow, your mast base is quite far back today, or gee, your mast base is extremely far forward. You put it right in the middle and you're safe. Next time you go sailing, just take your mast base, your twist on, your clip in, whatever it is, and slam it all the way back, as far back in the track as it will go. And go sailing with that and see what it feels like. I don't care if you're on a 7.5 or a 5.0. Give that a try. Try to get used to things being farther back on the board. You may need to shorten your harness lines up a little bit in order to pull that off, and you also may need to drop your boom height a little bit. It'll vary for each person, but give that a try, and in a few minutes I'm going to show you why. All right, after you go out and sail with your mast track all the way back for a while, and you kind of make it happen and you get used to it, then start inching it forward a little bit by bit. And you may find out that for your style of sailing or your size fin or your board, you may end up, you know, a bit farther forward than all the way back. And that's cool, but at least try sailing with the thing all the way back for a while, and it'll teach you some important stuff about foot pressure and having your board right up high and horizontally. This drill that I'm going to show you right now is probably the most important of the three. And I call this the speed inducement drill, or the anti-marlin drill. You can call it whatever you want. Basically, it's an exercise in a little bit of pain for a lot of gain. And what I start off with generally is by questioning everybody as to where they put their booms. Like how high, when you're standing on your board with a universal joint in and everything rigged up, how high do you generally put your booms? And the average thought on boom height around the country when I do clinics is somewhere between about here and the chin. And that's okay. I mean, you know, it's not that bad of a deal. But let's just say, for instance, I have my booms right up here about my collarbone, which I find to be fairly average around the country. You put your booms up this high, and then you have your harness lines here, and generally they're fairly short, at least from what I see doing these clinics. Okay, so you've got the fairly short harness lines, you got the booms up fairly high, you get back in your straps, and you got your seat harness on with a hook that's generally down about this height, and your harness loop would be about here. So you have a large distance between the hook and the loop. That's not so bad until you start thinking about it. Well, to get hooked in, you got to rake the rig way back on the tail of the board and kind of get your hook into the loop. Then you tend to bring the rig over to weather. In other words, you start raking it this way so that you can remain hooked in, and everybody kind of just sort of sits down in the harness, and their body weight holds the rig together and the board on the water. This works great when you're just cruising along, but what happens when you get a big puff and you really want to go fast? Well, the first thing that happens is that you get this big puff and you're so raked back and raked over to weather like this, so the wind would be coming this way. You're raked over to weather like this and you're raked back, and only thing you can really do is to rake the sail even further over to weather. So it's kind of like the old days when you were learning how to sail. You know, you had this really big sail on a big board, and the only thing you could do to start off in high winds was to take and sheet the sail out, rake the mast way over into the wind, and then fall back onto the rig. And that was the only way you could really control things. Same kind of deal is happening here with the really short lines and the high booms. As you get back, you get a big puff. The only way you can control it is by reducing the amount of sail that's shown to the wind, or the amount of sail that the wind can hit. And the only way to do that is to really rake the sail over to weather. And if you go to your local sailing site, look at some of the people sailing in high wind. And I bet you 3 out of 5 people you see on the water, if it's windy, will have their rig raked way over to weather like this. It's fine if you're in control, but the second you get to the upper limit of your zone with that size sail, a couple things start to happen. One is, the farther you rake the mast over to weather, the more lift, upward lift, the sail's creating. When the sail's straight up and down like this, all of the lift that the sail's creating is pulling you forward. The farther you rake the mast to weather, the more of an angle the sail is on, and the more of that power is starting to lift you up out of the water. Okay, there's another really strange thing that happens when you get in this position, and that is you start to force a lot more pressure on your back leg. I'm sure everybody has felt this. You know, it feels really cool in moderate wind to really stomp on the back leg. You get a lot of lift out of the fin. You're just pushing really hard sideways on your back foot. You get tons of lift out of the fin, and everything feels real good. You know, you got your gap closed, and it's styling, everything's just fine. Problem is when you get in this big gust, you start inducing more and more lift out of the sail and out of the fin. The only reason a fin creates lift is because you're pushing it sideways through the water. So you got to remember, the harder you push it sideways, the more lift it creates. Now when you're really powered up, you'd like your fin to be able to actually reduce lift, or have the fin get smaller would be a perfect deal. The only way you can do this is to figure out a way to start pushing pressure on your front leg instead of your back leg to try to kill the lift from the fin. And I'll show you a little drill you can do that will help you learn how to do this. First thing I want you to do is run your mast track all the way to the back of the box. The next thing is unclamp your booms and slide them down ridiculously low all the way to the bottom of the opening. I don't care if you're really tall or really short. whatever. Just if you've got, you know, a regular boom type opening, open the booms, slide it all the way down to the bottom, put the mast track at the back, and go sailing. Now you need a day where you could normally plane no problem for this drill. This is not a light air type of deal. Hit the booms all the way to the bottom, launch, go sailing. And what you're going to find out is that when you start to sail, you're going to be in a little ball kind of crunched up like this. The only way you can get out of it and make the board move forward is to straighten out your front leg. So you straighten out the front leg, that gets you to roll. Once you start planing and you hook in, you're going to feel a lot of pressure on your front thigh. In fact, it might even cramp, it might even hurt. That's okay, that's what I want you to feel. And the big thing you'll notice is that you don't have hardly any pressure on your back leg anymore. So that's key, remember that. After you do that for about 10 minutes, stop, unclamp the boom, raise it up a couple of inches, maybe 1.5 inches. Go sailing again. You'll find it's a little bit easier to deal with, but there's still no pressure on your back leg, but at least you're not cramping so much on your front leg. Do this for about 10 minutes, stop again, go up a couple more inches. Somewhere in this zone, depending on your height or the length of your legs, length of your torso, length of your arms, it varies for everybody. Somewhere in this, about the 3rd or 4th time you adjust, you're going to find that as you're sailing along, you have pressure on your front leg or your back leg at will. You can just decide for yourself whether you want to push on your back leg for more lift out of the fin, or come up and push on the front leg to hold the board down or to push forward. This is what I like to call your median boom height. And you should really remember where that height is. Like, look at your opening, you know, is it in the middle of the opening or just above the middle of the opening? Either make a mark or make a mental note where that boom height is. Once you have that boom height, then just remember this: if you're going course racing, you're probably going to want to have it higher than that, because when you're going upwind, you need a lot of lift from the fin, you need a little more pressure on the back leg. If you're going speed sailing in really smooth water, you might want to drop it down just a little bit, because generally when you're speed sailing, you're well overpowered, and the biggest problem you have is driving the board forward and keeping the board from lifting up out of the water. So once again, the drill is mast track all the way back, booms at the bottom of the opening, go sail. Try it for 10 minutes, try to make it work, feel what's happening to your legs. Stop, raise the booms up a little bit, do it again, remember what happens to your legs. Somewhere about the 3rd or 4th time you make that upward adjustment, you should feel balanced between both legs on the board, and that's the key height. You can make a lot of variations on this. One thing is that if your booms are very low compared to your normal setting, you'll find that your butt's hitting the chop in really choppy water. That's not fast either, you know. I mean, if you're slamming the water with your butt, you're not going to go fast. So you might need to make some adjustments upward to cure that. It might be a harness line thing. You might need to shorten the lines a little bit to get your butt out of the water. So use common sense, but try to find a place, or if your local spot is fairly smooth, you should be able to go all the way to the bottom and work your way back up. And if you really want to experiment, even go all the way up to the top and feel that feeling where the only way you can hold your foot in the strap is by pulling straight up on it. That makes things a lot worse, but it's a good feeling for you to see, or to, that is a good thing to check out, just to see the other end of the spectrum or the scale. After you try this drill, the thing you're going to notice is that every time you go sailing, no matter where you're set up with your booms or your harness lines, is that every time you sail, you're going to have that different feeling in your legs where you start to hit some bumps or you hit a big puff. You'll be able to control it by getting forward, pushing the board down, keeping it from wheeling or marlining. Or if you need a little more lift, you'll be able to go boom, back here, hit the back foot, rail the board over, get a little more lift out of the fin. This drill has improved more people's speed than any of the other tips combined. They all need to be done, but this one is the most important. There was a guy in Long Island, at Heckscher State Park in Long Island, and real athletic guy, had really good new gear, fast stuff, liked to drag race everybody on the lake. We brought our timing system, actually it's a sound, brought our timing system to the park. The winners that day, or the fast guys, were going about 31 miles an hour. And he just kept hitting 27, 27, 27, 27 over and over and over. Finally he came in and he goes, okay, I'll try it. You know, during the whole time I was giving the clinic, he was basically not into it at all. Had his booms very high, his track forward, had his lines really short. So he came in, I just unclamped his booms. The guy's about 6'4", slid him basically to the bottom of the opening, lengthened his lines, and pulled his track all the way back. He struggled his way out, lined up for a speed run, came in and went 31 miles an hour the very first run. So just by doing that stuff in the same wind conditions, he picked up about 5 miles an hour. He told me that he felt like he was going slower. And that's something that you guys might notice as well. Just because it feels like you're going super fast doesn't necessarily mean you are. When you're in really good control, everything will feel stable and smooth. And smooth and stable feels a lot slower than radical, bouncy, out of control. So try to hook up with one of your buddies and go drag racing when you're trying this kind of stuff and see who's faster and what makes you go faster. So anyway, give this one a try. It works really well, and it only takes about a half hour out of your day. So that's basically the end of the video. What I'd like to tell you now is that you know how there's that one guy that you always sail with, or maybe a couple guys that you always see at your local sailing spot, that no matter what you do, they seem to pass you. Maybe at will, maybe it's a struggle. Don't show them this video. Work on the tips, spend some time, get everything wired, and go out there. Next time you see this guy, I tell you it'll be a different story. If we travel by